And we'll call the February 27th, 2023 meeting of the Town of Somerville Planning Commission to order. First order of business be the approval of minutes from the meeting on January 23rd.
I move for approval.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. If there are no additions or corrections, all in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, like sign. The ayes have it. We have 4 public hearings. The first, an ordinance to amend the Unified Development Ordinance, Chapter 3, to provide an event venue use and provide for the districts in which it is allowed in Section 3.3, and to provide for the applicable conditions to allow the use in Section 3.4. You want to say anything about that, Jesse, or?
Just briefly, this is an amendment that we recognized this use was kind of missing from the UDO. We have a conference convention center for events, but we don't really have if someone wants to do a smaller event type of venue. And so we did have some folks who've been interested in that type of thing and didn't really have a route for them to take because it wasn't something where a conference center would be applicable or really able to be approved in that area, but felt like maybe a smaller venue could be something that could be approved. And so this was the attempt to try and come up with something that would fit that type of venue while still protecting surrounding property owners. So it looked at a lot of different ordinances around the state and tried to kind of mesh what I thought would work for us together from other ordinances.
We're talking particular commercial events, that sort of thing.
Yes, this ordinance does allow it in residential zoning districts with a number of restrictions, and it only allows it a certain number of times per year. And it is would be a special exception in those, so it would have to go through the BZA so that adjacent property owners would have the ability to object or that sort of thing. So it's I know, Jim, you're familiar with a number of Airbnb, I mean, not Airbnbs, a number of bed and breakfasts used to do events in town, and then the ordinance a number of years ago changed and they could no longer do that. This kind of is trying to give some of that ability back within reason.
Okay. Is there anyone else that wishes to speak to this? If not, we'll close that. Move on to the second one, an ordinance to amend the Unified Development Ordinance, Chapter 13, Section 13.3.5, to provide that the 7-member design review board is to be comprised in part of 1 architect, to include a landscape contractor in Section 13.3.5, B2 and 3 at-large seats. Just housekeeping.
This is one that council proposed. I don't really have a true explanation for it.
What was the makeup of that board to begin with? What
So
are we
prior
changing it from?
to the UDO, it was 1 architect, and then the others, it was 3 at-large seats. The other seats, the landscape contractor was not included as a potential position for one of the seats. That's being added to where it can be a landscape architect, urban designer, or landscape contractors, where they're adding that in. With the UDO, we changed it to 2 architects on the board. The thought process behind that was to provide counterpoints so that one person's architectural style wasn't seen all the time. But I know it has been difficult to find 2 architects to serve on the board. So I don't know if that's the reasoning. I'm not entirely sure.
Okay. Does anyone else wish to speak to this? If not, we'll close that, and move on to the third hearing, ordinance to amend the Unified Development Ordinance, Chapter 13, Section 13.8.2A4 to exclude demolition of non-contributing accessory structures.
And this one is simple housekeeping. There was a contradiction within the ordinance.
Is this removing a restriction? Is that my understanding?
So the previous section of the ordinance where it gives staff the ability to approve minor projects stated that if it's a non-contributing accessory structure, staff can approve the demolition. But then in this section, it said that only the board could approve demolition of anything, and so they contradicted each other. So this is specifying that staff can indeed improve non-contributing accessory structures.
Another bit of housekeeping for us. All right, is there anyone that wants to speak to this? If not, we'll close that, move on to number 4, a ordinance to amend the Unified Development Ordinance, Chapter 15, definitions to provide the definition for event venue and correct the definition for utility pole. Well, that's, I think that's self-explanatory. Yeah. Is there anyone who wishes to speak to this? If not, we'll close that and move to new business. First, new street names is needed. One name needed. Why do
Yes,
we
sir.
need to
This
name-
is for the little alley between People, Places and Quilts and the Public Works Arts Center. Apparently that is a 10-foot wide public alley as shown on the plat. So because it is a publicly maintained, it should have a name. In speaking to Mr. Melfi, apparently he prefers Lex Alley over any of the other two, but he is okay with any of them. He has as you know, he has the art studio that's been kind of off that alley for many years.
I move. Can I make a motion? Yeah.
Oh, yes.
I move to name it Melfi Alley. Yeah, but there are more Melfis in town than there are, well,
Okay, I have a motion to name it Melfi Alley. Is there a second?
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? I have a bit of a hang up on naming streets and boulevards and alleyways or anything after living people. Too many times we've named streets and highways and stuff for bridges and that sort of thing for folks that were alive that turned out to be scoundrels in the end.
well, and that's one reason why I prefer. Yeah, that's one reason why I prefer the family name. Because it's more general and there are plenty of them in town.
Okay. Any other comments?
So we have a good 50% of chances of them being scoundrels or upright.
Well, there you go. So there's no other discussion. I'll call for the question. All in favor of Melfi Alley, signify by saying aye.
I
Those like sign, those opposed like sign, the ayes have it. Oh, we have the aforementioned ordinances. The ordinance to amend Chapter 3 to provide an event venue. Do I have a motion?
Yes, I moved to amend the ordinance of the UDO as stated in item number 2.
Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor of amending the ordinance, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, like sign. The ayes have it. It's unanimous. The ordinance to amend the Unified Development Ordinance, Chapter 13, Section 13.3.5 to provide the 7-member design review board is comprised in part of 1 architect to include a landscape architect and 3 at-large seats. Do I have a motion?
Landscape contractor is what,
Landscape contractor. Yes. Do I have a motion?
Motion to approve.
I have a second.
I second.
A motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, like sign. The ayes have it. Ordinance to amend the Unified Development Ordinance, Chapter 13, Section 13.8.2A4 to exclude demolition of non-contributing accessory structures. Do I have an ordinance? Do I have?
I moved to amend this ordinance listed in our
have a mo-
agenda as item number 4.
Have a motion to have a second?
Second.
Have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor of the ordinance to exclude demolition of non-contributing accessory structures signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, like sign. Ayes have it. Ordinance to amend the Unified Development Ordinance, Chapter 15, definitions to provide the definition for event venue and correct the definition for a utility pole. Do I have a motion?
Motion to approve.
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
Have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Ayes have it. Miscellaneous. You have any miscellaneous, Jess?
I do not have any miscellaneous.
Miscellaneous.
I move to adjourn.
I have a motion to adjourn. Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Meeting is adjourned.
Thank you. I read them out of the meeting. Sorry. I said I have Stephen ministry meeting now that started at